What is Ethereum? I always hear about it. I've heard that it is the second biggest cryptocurrency, but I can't seem to get my mind around it. Is it as disruptive as Bitcoin? Can it genuinely alter the current state of the world? Continue watching if you want to learn more about Ethereum, but are tired of explanations that sound like complete technical nonsense. Hello everyone, welcome to Finance Wisdom. In this video, we're going to talk about what is Ethereum for Beginners 2022. If you're new to this channel, do like and subscribe to the channel. These inquiries and others will be addressed. Since Bitcoin is the foundation from which Ethereum was created, it is important that we quickly review it before moving on to Ethereum. You undoubtedly already know that Bitcoin is a kind of decentralized currency. But if you're still unclear about what that term means or how it operates, you may want to watch our original video, What is Bitcoin again? Before the creation of Bitcoin, the only method to utilize money digitally required the use of a middleman, such as a bank or a PayPal. Even then, the currency used was still one that the government produced and maintained. All of that was altered by Bitcoin, a decentralized form of money that allowed people to transact with each other directly and without the need for a middleman. The whole Bitcoin network verifies and accepts every transaction. This system is nearly impossible to shut down, manipulate, or control since there is no single point of failure. Now that we're aware that money can be decentralized, what other currently centralized societal functions can benefit from being decentralized? Voting. What about it? Votes must be counted and verified by a central authority in order to be legitimate. Currently, centralized property registration authorities are used in real estate transfer records. Based on centralized servers, social networks like Facebook manage all of the data we submit to them. What if we could decentralize other things as well, using the blockchain technology that powers Bitcoin? The intriguing aspect of blockchain technology is that it is a byproduct of the creation of Bitcoin. By combining pre-existing technologies like encryption, proof of work, and decentralized network design, blockchain technology was developed in order to establish a system that can make choices decentralized. Before the creation of Bitcoin, blockchain technology didn't exist. However, as soon as Bitcoin became a reality, people began to notice how and why it works, and this thing became known as blockchain technology. Similar to how the internet is to email, blockchain is a platform on top of which you can develop programs and apps. One of the choices is a currency like Bitcoin. People were really thrilled about this, and they started looking into other decentralization options. However, a used computer network is required to operate a system in order for it to be genuinely decentralized. The only network at the time was Bitcoin, and it had just a few users. Because Bitcoin is written in a Turing imperfect language, it can only grasp a limited number of commands such as who sent how much money to whom and when. A new programming language which calls for a different computer network is required to build a more complicated system. Consider for a moment if you wanted to create your own decentralized software at home. Similar to Bitcoin, you'd need to comprehend how Bitcoin's decentralization works. Create software that copies that behavior, assemble a sizable computer network to execute the software, and so forth. And all of that laborious labor. Now, let's talk about what is Ethereum for beginners in 2022. Vitalik Buterin, who was at the time the co-founder of Bitcoin magazine, said Ethereum was originally suggested in late 2013 and subsequently given life in 2014. The platform for do-it-yourself decentralized applications or dApps is called Ethereum. All you need to do is learn the Ethereum programming language called Solidity and start writing if you want to build decentralized software that nobody, not even you, controls. The Ethereum network is completely decentralized since it is administered by thousands of separate computers. When a program is uploaded to the Ethereum network, these machines, which are sometimes called nodes, make sure it runs the way it was meant to. The platform used to operate dApps globally is Ethereum. It's a platform, not a medium of exchange. Ether is the name of the currency that is used to reward the network, but more on that in a moment. The purpose of Ethereum is to really decentralize the internet. Wait, Centralized Ethernet? I believe that the Ethernet was already decentralized and that anybody could launch a website. While that may be true in theory, the majority of the Ethernet as we know it is controlled by companies such as Amazon, Google, Facebook, Netflix, and others. Virtually every online action involves a third party or middleman of some kind. But as Bitcoin proved the idea of digital decentralization, a whole new set of prospects open up. Now that there is no longer a requirement for a centralized third party, we can finally start to envision and develop an Ethernet that links consumers directly. Hard drive space may be rented directly to other users, making dropbacks unnecessary. Drivers may directly market their services to passengers, cutting out Uber as a middleman. Without the need for an exchange that can be hacked or where your money might be stolen, people can purchase cryptocurrencies directly from one another. Ethereum enables direct communication between individuals without the need for a centralized administration. It is a collection of computers working together to form a strong, distributed supercomputer. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. Now that you know what Ethereum does, let's talk about how it does it. Smart contracts, the code that powers dApps, are created using Solidity, an Ethereum coding language. I'll explain. In reality, a contract is nothing more than a series of ifs and thens, a combination of circumstances and behaviors. For instance, my landlord will allow me to use my flat provided I pay him $1,500 on the first of the month. On Ethereum, smart contracts operate in the exact same way. The Ethereum network runs the application, or dApp, once the conditions are written by developers using Ethereum. They are known as smart contracts because they handle all contract-related issues, including management, performance, and payment. The landlord doesn't have to actively collect the rent, for instance, if I have a smart contract for that purpose. If the money has been sent, the contract knows it. I will be able to access my flat's door if I really did send the money. I'll be locked out if I don't make my payment on time. However, there are drawbacks to smart contracts as well. Recalling my earlier example, a smart contract would prevent the non-paying tenant from returning to their unit, saving the landlord from having to evict them. On the other hand, a truly smart contract would also take into account things like mitigating circumstances, the reason why the contract was made, and the ability to make exceptions when they are needed. In other words, it would function as an excellent judge. However, in the context of Ethereum, a smart contract is not at all clever. In actuality, it is a very tight fit without wiggle room. It strictly adheres to the law's requirements and is unable to take any additional factors or the spirit of the law into account, as is often the case with contracts in the real world. A smart contract that has been published on the Ethereum network cannot be changed or amended, not even by the creator. It is unchangeable. It is practically impossible to amend this contract, since doing so would require persuading the whole Ethereum network that a change is necessary. This poses a very severe issue since, in contrast to Bitcoin, Ethereum was designed to enable the creation of very sophisticated contracts, and complicated contracts are notoriously hard to protect. The more complicated a contract is, the harder it is to enforce it. This could be because there is more room for interpretation or because more terms are needed to cover possible situations. Security in the context of smart contracts entails managing every potential scenario for contract execution with the utmost precision to ensure that the contract is only used as intended. The slogan, "Code is law," was used when Ethereum was started. In other words, a contract on Ethereum is the final arbiter, and no one has the power to override a contract. That all ended abruptly when the DAO, or DAO episode, occurred, however. A decentralized autonomous organization, sometimes known as DAO or DAO, lets users deposit funds and get rewards depending on the investments that the DAO makes. Decentralized decision-making would be used to make the choices themselves. When Ether was valued at roughly $20, the DAO raised $150 million in that cryptocurrency. Although everything sounded great, the code wasn't properly protected, which led to someone finding a method to steal money from the DAO. Now, you might claim that the DAO's drainer was a hacker. However, others contend that this person was only exploiting the security weaknesses he discovered in the DAO smart contract. This isn't all that different from a clever attorney finding a gap in the law to get a favorable outcome for his client. The Ethereum community then altered the Ethereum rules to reverse all the funds that had been invested in the DAO after deciding that the code was no longer legal. In other words, the investors and contract authors made a bad decision, and the Ethereum devs opted to save them. The tiny minority who disagreed with this decision remained on the Ethereum blockchain until its protocol was changed, and as a result, Ethereum Classic, which is the genuine original Ethereum, was created. Since we've already covered a lot, I want to finish by discussing Ethereum as a currency. Ethereum is essentially a big group of machines that cooperate like a supercomputer to run the DApp-enabling code. It all costs money to procure the machines, power them up, store them, and cool them as necessary. Ether was created for this purpose. When people discuss the cost of Ethereum, they really mean the price of Ether, the cryptocurrency used to reward users for running the Ethereum protocol on their computers. This is a lot like how Bitcoin miners are paid for keeping the Bitcoin network running. A smart contracts creator must pay to deploy it on the Ethereum platform. Ether is used to pay for such services. This is done to encourage the writing of efficient and optimized code and to prevent the use of the Ethereum network's computational resources for pointless activities. The first initial coin offering for Ethereum in 2014 saw the first distribution of Ether. At the time, 1 Ether cost around 40 cents. Since the ICO craze that began in 2017 has greatly increased the usage of the Ethereum network, 1 Ether now is worth hundreds of dollars. Now that we are finished and tackle what is Ethereum for Beginners 2022, I hope you have learned something from this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, do give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. Thank you and goodbye.